in the presentation, this will sort of orient you to what it is we're going to be talking about at the Plan Commission in a week or so, and for the public. It's also available online, I think. I brought copies of the document so you can all look at them after I've run through them, so you can actually see what they are that we're talking about. So this has to do with the Western Growth Area. The plan for the Western Growth Area is on the boards behind you. And the Western Growth Area Master Plan was adopted in February. So it was a year and a half ago or so. So the Western Growth Area Plan has been done for a while. And when the Western Growth Area Plan got adopted, it was with the intent that 2 other compendium parts would be done after the plan was adopted, taking their direction from the plan. One was detailed design guidelines that would be used to guide all development, the architecture, the appearance, the landscaping, the conservation of land, the roads, everything. We would have guidelines with which to evaluate anything anybody proposed. And then the second piece would be a plan unit development ordinance, so that if someone proposed something, you would have the ordinance or the development regulations in your zoning ordinance to regulate and oversee the development that came forth. So those are the 2 other pieces. So those are the 2 pieces we're going to talk about, is the design guidelines and the PUD ordinance. So those are the 3 key documents, again, that work as a package. First one is the Western Growth Area Master Plan that was adopted. And tonight we're going to talk about the Western Growth Area Design Guidelines and the Western Growth Area PUD, or Planned Unit Development District. That's a zoning piece. So the first thing in the design guidelines, and this is the document here. There's only a couple of you. I'll let you look at one while you're here, and I'll get one for you as well, because I brought 2 copies. So this is what this looks like. So you can look at them while I'm presenting. But the design guidelines, so real quick, the purpose is intended to support and strengthen land use and development recommendations found in the Western Growth Area, and these are the objectives. Reinforce the desired character and identity of Palos Park, promote development that completes the character of Palos Park, ensures high-quality building and site design in the Western Growth Area, establishes a development pattern that is in harmony with the existing natural environment, and fosters development that respects pedestrian and bicycle activity while supporting vehicular traffic, but we really want to emphasize the bike and ped. So this is stated at the very beginning of the design guidelines. The content is broken into these 3 pieces: an introduction, which talks about the purpose, the design guidelines for all residential development, and the design guidelines for all the commercial development, broken into general guidelines for all commercial, and then specific guidelines for Archer Avenue and Mid-Iron, golf course, resort and town center area, and then the business park. So the first thing is to take a look at the residential design guidelines. The residential design guidelines break down, and you'll see them. I've got a PDF up here, we'll go through these. But it addresses all of these different types of elements, both imagery with photographs, as well as text describing what the guiding principles are. For architecture, style, and anti-monotony, so all the homes don't look the same. Building orientation and setback, senior housing, building materials and color, massing and roof lines, facades, solar panels, garages and driveways, all lighting, block configuration for new subdivisions, all landscaping, and then environmental features, open space, water conservation, things like that. So for each one of these bullets, there are design guidelines governing what we want to be looking at and the quality we want to achieve with all of these elements. The commercial design guidelines, first we talk about these elements for all commercial areas: building material and architecture, access and circulation, parking and loading, roof lines, lighting, signs, landscaping, and then stormwater management and low impact. And this is so when a development comes to either staff or the Plan Commission, you'll be able to do a couple things. You'll be able to open up the Western Growth Area Master Plan, that document, and say, is what you're proposing consistent with the plan, the right use in the right place, meeting these goals and objectives per the plan. Then once it meets the plan, you say, does the actual development begin to reflect the design guidelines? And you can say, is it meeting what we say should be the building materials and architectural elements for commercial? Is it meeting the lighting standards or the roofing standards for what we have for residential? We then break the commercial into 3 different pieces. One is Archer Avenue and Mid-Iron. This is more, think of it as sort of corridor commercial. These are on larger arterial automobile corridors, and so it's geared to accommodate the pedestrian, but also accommodate larger fields of parking along major roadways. We then have a section on the golf course, resort, or town center. This is the area that would be in the middle of Cog Hill. Think of it as sort of like a small downtown, pedestrian-oriented, spas, entertainment, high-end restaurants, boutiques, sort of a pedestrian village center type of an area in the center of what would be the Cog Hill sort of redevelopment.
Where exactly would that be, just talk to me.
Well, I'm just going to grab one of these plans and you'll be able to see it.
I know how it's laid out now, I just want to know where it would go. What's going away to make room for it?
It would be sort of like right where Cog Hill's clubhouse is, more or less.
The main club.
Yeah, right in here. So that's this sort of orange area you see here. So the red area, this is the commercial area on Archer. This is the red commercial area where Mid-Iron is. And then the other commercial area is this area sort of in the center of the golf course area, where Cog Hill is. So those are sort of the three different ones. The business park location is a location right up here in this triangle area. Here it's shown as residential. Elsewhere in the framework plan it's shown as hatched, because while it could be residential, it could also accommodate sort of a research or business park, a really attractive, like nestled into the environment, like a business park. And that's kind of what this shows is it's a big enough piece of property to put a real nice research or light industrial business park office type of use there instead of all being residential.
Would the commercial there on the Cog Hill grounds, as it were, would they intend to keep the main clubhouse as it is and develop around it, make that part of it, or would it be scraped? And
Don't know. I don't know if they've indicated what they're going to do with their existing facility. Have they said anything, or do you know, Rick? I don't know.
I think they've indicated that they would keep the clubhouse, and that this would be a different area. But the clubhouse, the main, what they call 1-3 clubhouse would stay.
She did indicate that the new development should be compatible with the existing.
That's what I was.
Yeah, so.
That's a pretty attractive.
Right. And the idea is, the best way I can articulate it is if they envision making Cog Hill sort of a golf resort destination where a whole family could go there, spend a week there, golf, shop, dine, recreate, mountain bike, and so it wouldn't just be to go there to golf for the day and leave. It could be a destination. And to do that, part of it would be to have this sort of a quaint, active, sort of a main street shopping, entertainment, dining area in near where their golf course or their golf club is. And again, then this would be the potential for a business park further up north. So that's sort of how the design guidelines are laid out. And we'll go through a PDF of that later.
Could you go back one frame?
Yeah.
To that pic? And what do you think that is?
This,
Yeah.
it looks a lot like the Northbrook Library. I don't know if it is or not.
I've never seen a business park developed with that sort of look before.
Yeah, and we didn't want to put this ugly sort of a tilt-up business park picture in there, but whether it's office research, a combination, maybe some light assembly, something like that, where we don't want to have a distribution facility with 100 loading docks on it, but a pretty big building that employed a bunch of people that maybe had 5 or 6 loading docks on it could be really nice. That sort of a scale of building. But a business park, not a full-blown industrial use. The sort of the less sexy part, but one of the most important parts, is the PUD district. This is the zoning with which would be used. Maybe less fun to look at, but as a planning commission member, you'll be intimately familiar with that eventually. The PUD process is a way for which the village would be able to consider development. It's the process by which people would apply. Any development out in the designated Western Growth Area Master Plan, any development would have to be approved as a planned unit development, requiring residents being legally noticed, a public hearing by the Plan Commission, a recommendation from the Plan Commission to the village board then making an ultimate decision. So any development out there would require this process. So it's a new change to your zoning ordinance. So the purpose is that of the Western Growth Area Plan Development District to provide locations for commercial, employment, and diverse housing options that are integrated with an extensive network of preserved natural areas, foster a strong sense of place through high-quality development in keeping with the core values of the village as detailed in the Western Growth Area Master Plan. So any development, in addition to meeting the procedures of the PUD ordinance, have to comply with the recommendations of the plan and needs to demonstrate that it is in general compliance with the design guidelines. So those two things are triggered as standards of review within the ordinance. So the first thing they have to do is procedure for approval the first thing is sort of like to get the idea, tentatively idea or concept approved. And then once the concept is approved, then go back and do the fine line detailed stuff and bring that final detailed plan back through for approval. So this is a list of all the stuff they need to do for approval. They need to submit all of this information. So it's extensive. So you can see topography, sketch plans, existing streets, existing utilities, existing water. They need to record and document in a plat of survey and other things, all the existing uses that are out there. They have to identify the proposed density and uses by unit type and number of dwelling units, the anticipated square footage of any non-residential, so if they want retail or restaurant or business park, how big it's going to be. They have to identify all the parking facility services. They have to identify any variations or allowances they need from zoning to get this accomplished. Then they have to take a look at, again, natural resource inventory. Where are the water features, the wetlands, the mature stands of trees, any sorts of environmental features that we need to be aware of. They have to submit a natural resources inventory, preliminary architectural concepts, and then they have to identify their school impact, their preliminary market study, a schedule of the development, and then an initial stormwater and traffic analysis. And that is when they first bring their concept through to the Plan Commission and staff. Plan Commission and the village has to have enough sense of what's going on to approve the concept so that they can then go back and do all the really detailed stuff and bring back the refined, detailed plan. But this is the initial phase, what they have to do. Formal petition, this is what they have to do. They have to, for a formal petition, they have to do a filing, file a fee. It has to be reviewed with village staff to make sure it's 100% complete. The clerk will then forward a copy of this to the mayor and each member of council and the commission. The commission then does a report to council of its findings. The planning commission will hold a public hearing and report its findings to the council. And then they have to certify that the plan meets the requirements of the zoning code. So it meets with staff, they review it, staff determines if the application is complete and they have everything they need to proceed. If they have everything they need to proceed, it gets on the Plan Commission docket. A public hearing notice will be sent out to all property owners that are required to meet the distance requirement. The Plan Commission will conduct a public hearing, a series of meetings. They then will make a determinations of findings of fact and a recommendation. That recommendation will then go to village board. The village board will then vote on it, and then the plat can be recorded and the development can move forward. The contents of the formal petition are these: a development plat, preliminary architecture for all multifamily and non-single buildings. We don't need to see the architectural plans for single family, because it may very well be that they pull a series of lots and design the subdivision, but let people bring their individual architects to bear to build the house they want. But if they're building townhomes or row homes or multifamily or something as part of this, or senior housing, they need to provide those preliminary architectural plans so we know what's going on. A topographical survey, a plan of the entire development area, a map of the village and the area surrounding the development to show how it's going to work. Preliminary plans need to include these: roads, streets, alleys, sidewalks, sewage disposal, water system, stormwater calculations, a natural resource inventory plan. Again, they have to demonstrate that they are effectively planning within the natural features that are on the site through conservation design. We don't want them just clearing out big areas and getting rid of those natural features. They need to take a look at streets, public areas for lighting, and then installations for electric, gas, telephone, etc. But these are all required components for a petition. These are, again, more of them, as you can see. A statement of how the development aligns with the master plan. The village spent more than a year, several public meetings, multiple open houses, resident feedback, comment cards, feedback to the website. And from all of that input, they developed a land use or a master plan for the Western Growth Area that was adopted. So one of the key standards for any development is, does it align with that master plan that was adopted? So that master plan is still the guiding document. And this gives teeth, regulatory teeth to that plan. The names and addresses of anybody that has to be noticed, obviously, a development for schedule of the property, proposed agreements or provisions or covenants that may run with it, so the village knows if it's selling the property off to people, the developer is, what covenants are running with that land. And then other sorts of things with regard to, again, electric, gas, plant materials, sculpting, berming, aesthetics, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes back to the school. So the plan commission is going to get a pretty big packet. And I go like this because I'm old school. It used to be a big packet like this. Now it's just a big file attached to your email. It'll be a lot to look through. And when a development gets approved through a PUD ordinance process, all the exhibits are tied to that approval. So the landscape plan, the preliminary architecture, the lighting, the natural resource inventory plan, all of those exhibits, when the gavel comes down and the plan commission recommends it and the village council ultimately adopts or approves it, when that gavel comes down and the vote is taken, all those exhibits are part of that agreement. And that's what the village will use to go back and check to make sure they're doing what they need to be doing. And then the final preparation is this. You have to submit a final plan, common open space documents identifying all the open space and how it's going to be taken care of. Public facilities, the construction plans, construction schedule. They have to, a statement that there's no delinquent taxes, so they don't have to submit delinquent taxes, but a statement that there aren't any, and then any covenants that run with the land. So that's the PUD ordinance, but in a nutshell, they have to submit all their plans, they have to meet with staff, go over the concept, work with staff to pull everything together. When staff says, this is everything we need, you can then apply to the Plan Commission public hearing. Plan Commission then conducts the public hearing, makes a recommendation, the recommendation goes to village board then approves or doesn't approve. So that's the guidelines and the PUD. What I'll do now is I'll go through this document, and then we've got a few copies, you can look at it. So this is what the actual document looks like itself, the design guidelines. First thing is we sort of summarize the intent and purpose of this and describe the whole design guidelines. We then talk about the introduction and we talk about the purpose and the objectives. And we're very clear. And it's the ones I went through on the first slide. To protect the natural features in the open space, to design with integrity in the natural environment, to protect the quality and character of Palos Park, to ensure high quality development, etc. It's all here right in the guidelines. And again, when someone proposes something, this is what the Plan Commission will use in part to evaluate the proposal. We then get into residential design guidelines like I discussed. And for each one of these, so this whole page is just talking about architectural style and monotony. So in my previous slide, that was just a bullet, but we give examples about what we're talking about, and then we detail out exactly what is and is not expected in terms of attention to detail for architecture and monotony. Building orientation, setbacks, and building height. This all talks about this, make sure that no matter what type of residential is there, the height is correct, the orientation is correct, and the building itself, the setbacks, no matter what type it is, whether it's single family or townhomes, or let's say a senior housing, it's appropriately scaled and located on the site. Again, we're trying to get away from some of these developments that you see, you drive down the street and all you're seeing is a side of a house with no windows on it. All right, or a real nice front facade, it turns the corner and it's just vinyl siding. Or you just see nothing but garage, door after garage, door after garage door. These are some of the elements we don't want to see out here, and this sets that standard. So this is, again, more building orientation, height, and setbacks continued. And then we also talk about location of accessory uses and amenities, and then any mechanical equipment. I've seen a lot of places where the house or the development is beautiful, and then they put the mechanical equipment for that in the worst place possible. When you drive by and all you see is the mechanical stuff. So we try to get pretty detailed as to how to address these things. Senior housing, a few different descriptors as to what we want to see for all senior housing, knowing it's a wide spectrum of what we might see. We talk about building material and color, what is and is not permitted and or preferred for building material and quality. Massing and roof lines, a couple of pages on that. Facade design, entrances and windows, the articulation we expect to see on all residential structures. How solar can be incorporated into this. Encourage solar. Solar is great, but we want to make sure it's done in a manner that is consistent with the design of development and accommodated. Garages, access, and driveways, how that's accommodated, and then all residential lighting. And other than just the building, some people might be coming in and laying out like a new subdivision, all right, or a new development, and they might come in and put in the streets, They might put in the intersections, and then they might plat out the single-family parcels, and the homes may come later. So how long are the block lengths? What do the streets look like? We talk about street cross-section, street design, neighborhood design, and we're not talking about the buildings, we're talking about everything that would support the buildings. Because the buildings may come back later as an individual decides to build a house on one of the lots. And then we talk a little bit about landscaping as well. And again, for all of these, and again, environmental considerations, how to do wetland, floodplain planning, cutting and filling, grading, preserving open space. We talk about the guidelines for doing all of that, because that area in the western growth area is pretty rich in environmental features. And that's an amenity, but it's also a challenge when it comes to development. So we try to make sure they're leveraged as an asset. And then conservation design. Conservation design is the notion that typical development is you come in and sort of scrape an area, subdivide it into lots and build homes. Conservation design is first you pull out all the areas that have value. Maybe it's prairie land, mature chance of streams, wetlands, wooded areas, and you protect all those areas first, and then you say what remaining area is suitable for development. So development sort of dovetails in with the natural environment as opposed to just getting built over the natural environment. So conservation design is one of the guiding principles. Next we talk about commercial development, and again, for residential and commercial, we're not dictating what architecture you have to use, we're not dictating your building materials, we're not dictating design. We're trying to establish a threshold to help guide quality and character and materials, but it could be a wide variety of appearance. So again, the commercial design guidelines, we break it into a few different components. The first one are general design guidelines. So it doesn't matter what commercial or non-residential you're doing, it would have to meet these guidelines. And again, similar to residential, building materials and architecture, access and circulation, parking and loading, roof lines, all lighting. Lighting is a bit more nuanced for commercial, obviously, than residential. And then signage and landscaping for both perimeter, interior, foundation, and then on-site. And then stormwater management techniques, again, so it all begins to look a lot better. Then we look specifically at those three commercial areas I was talking about. So we look specifically first at Archer and Mid-Iron. These are these red sites here on the plan. So now we're talking specifically about this big site on Archer and Mid-Iron down here as commercial. These are more sort of corridor commercial. So we identify building placement and orientation, massing and roof lines, building materials, access and parking, pedestrian amenities, signage and landscaping. That's for those areas. Then we take a look at what we're calling this golf course resort or town center area. And this is, if you know where Cog Hill is, it's where their clubhouse is. It's this area sort of surrounding the middle of their golf course. And what we're planning there is to accommodate the establishment over time of sort of a shopping, dining, pedestrian-oriented. There might be boutiques, there might be white tablecloth restaurants, there could be galleries there, but a nice, quaint, pedestrian-scaled shopping, dining, entertaining, sort of a small district in the middle of their site near where their clubhouse is, and in fitting that setting. So we talk about some of the amenities we'd like to see in that type of development, but again, that would be totally different than what you'd see on Archer, or totally different than what you'd see on the Mid-Iron site. That would be a much bigger scale. So we talk here about the massing, the roof lines, the placement of the buildings in these areas, what the pedestrian environments could look like, the architectural design, how parking and loading should be handled in these areas because it's a little bit different, and how landscaping should be handled in these areas. The next piece we talk about is this business park. And there's an area up on the ComEd easement in Archer right here. It's under unified ownership right here, obviously. There's a great location because it's sort of buffered from everything around it. That would be right for a business park. So we're not talking about massive trucking, we're not talking about warehouse and distribution. We're talking about like a business park or a research park or a building where you might have employees coming and doing that sort of stuff. So you're talking about buildings that may look like this. So again, not fleets of semi-trucks, but a campus setting, lots of landscaping. People would come in there and work in these buildings, sort of in an office or business setting. But we talk about that area specifically and what, again, the buildings, the massing, the parking, and other features might look like in that area of the development, what pedestrian areas would look like, and what site landscaping would look like. This would all be for a business park area. And so that's the document. And then the appendix is just a page from the plan itself. And you can see here, this is the Archer area, commercial, mid-iron over here. This hatched area here is where we think there could be room for a business park to go in this natural setting up here. Or this could be residential. We wanted to leave it flexible. Residential could easily go up there, but a business park could easily go up there. It's the only piece that sort of has that potential to go either way. And then this orange area here is sort of that village center, downtown, sort of town center golf resort environment in the middle. So again, that's just very quickly the design guidelines and what the intended purpose is. I went over sort of the PUD process. That's a little bit more complicated. So if you have any questions on the zoning process that anybody would have to go through, let me know. Again, this is just an open house, so it's meant to be very informal. This is a copy of the master plan. If you're not familiar with what was adopted 14 months ago, this is a copy of the plan itself. There's two up here, and there should be floating around. Oh, look at that, the back row. Those are hard copies of the design guidelines. I also have copies of the actual zoning ordinance. A lot less fun to look at. There's no pretty pictures. This is just words, but this is the zoning, so. Yeah,
Is that available online anywhere?
Yes.
Design guidelines are up and the PUD ordinance will be up tomorrow.
Okay,
And we'll post this presentation on our website as well.
okay, great.
yeah, John.
Show me on this map here, show me 123rd and Bell Road.
This is McCormick Road right here. This is Bell right here. So this is mid-iron. This pink is the ComEd easement.
That's going south, you're going south there.
No, this is north this way.
That's north, that's south down there. Okay. Are the houses at 123rd, is that all the area that you have mapped out in the plan? I mean, do we own that now? Is that part of the village? What is part of the village? Just the
There is, you can see,
properties?
no, it's hard to see on here. There is the Palos Park boundaries on here in black. It's kind of hard to see. You can see it's a meandering sort of line. You can see it. It sort of jogs in and around. So it's only the area we're talking about that's in the black area.
Is that basically the country club?
Yeah, basically. It's Cog Hill, Glen Eagle, Mid-Iron, and the farm, right?
Correct.
Correct. It's those properties.
Well, Glen Eagles isn't part of it.
Not anymore.
Okay.
But
A
it's,
piece of it is.
yeah, but it's none of this. This is just showing to give people a sense of orientation and context.
All of that stuff you're planning basically is gonna go into the golf course. Are they planning to do all of this, or is this 30 years from now?
Oh, this is not, no, they don't have plans to do all this right now. No, this is to accommodate development as it comes in over the next couple of decades, because right now we have a plan finally, but there's no way the village has to regulatorily accommodate any development request right now.
Okay, what is the other property that could be built on beside the golf course? Residential?
So part of the Cog Hill land is not developed golf course.
Okay, and is that little housing development next to it, that lovely place before you get to Cog Hill?
If there's already houses on it, the answer is no.
That's
Fiore,
Okay.
So, you know, the difficulty here is understanding that, number one, right now, those four properties, those four areas that are owned by owners. I mean, they've had that land forever. The understanding is that the plan would be that some of that will continue to be, for example, in Cog Hill's situation, will continue to be golf course.
Right.
But probably not all of it. And even within the context of the golf course at Cog Hill, they want to develop it so that it's an attractive destination golf
Right.
course rather than you go, but you stay someplace else or you shop someplace else. They would sort of like to have the non-golfers have something to be able to appreciate there as well. But not all of, I'm just talking about Cog Hill now, not all of the Cog Hill owned land is currently developed either as the clubhouse or the golf course. They own a lot more
They own a
land
lot more.
than that. That goes all the way up, I don't know if you go up that direction, but it goes all the way up to the ComEd easements that are up there. So the idea here is to get out in front of them selling off 100 acres to whoever developer wants to buy the 100 acres. They can sell it all they want to, but the developer has to stay within the guidelines that are being proposed, suggested, codified here in order to be able to actually develop that property.
This you can see because it's a slightly different colored gray, and the black boundary talks about the properties that we're showing. The properties outside of that are just shown for context, it's what this black boundary.
So for example, if you're driving down McCarthy and you get to Bell, first you pass, no, on the right side, the housing development. Yeah, first you pass the Equestrian Estate. They don't belong to Palos Park, they don't want to belong to Palos Park, they won't be belong to Palos Park, at least in the foreseeable future.
Right.
That's already a done deal. Palos Park has absolutely nothing to do with that. Then there's that whole bunch of little funky, big funky houses that got put up north of McCarthy on the west side of Bell Road. Those aren't us either. So that, and that is relatively new construction within the past couple of years, I think. And then as you meander up Archer from Bell, not a direction that many of us go, there's other land on the east side of Archer. Some of that is Cog Hill owned, some of that is not Cog Hill owned. If it ain't Cog Hill owned, we don't have, it's not a part of Palos Park. So this annexation, you should think about it in terms of the footprint being the golf courses.
Right.
When Glen Eagles decided that they didn't want to play by the rules, because theoretically we probably think this is Dan Polk citizen speaking, not Dan Polk councilman thinking, they probably have a buyer for a big piece of it. They didn't want to play by this, so they de-annexed a piece of that piece of property. That no longer is part of Palos Park. We have no control over that. There's about, what is it, 600 feet, 300 feet? I don't remember. 300. There's 300 feet to this. There's 300 feet to the south of McCarthy Road that is the front end of Glen Eagles that does still belong to Palos Park. That was part of the agreement in order to let them de-annex. That we will also have control over, but it doesn't extend as far south as the entire Glen Eagles property does. And then you got Ludwig Farms, which is not the Ludwig feed store. That's a different piece of the family. That Ludwig feed store is not a piece of Palos Park, but Ludwig Farms, which probably nobody has ever actually physically stepped foot on, because there aren't any roads back there. That also is a piece of Palos Park, and it's unclear.
That's here.
Right. It's unclear what any of that ultimately will be.
Right.
Same thing with Mid-Eye. So the idea here is not to wait until they have a bid from a developer that says we're going to give you X amount of dollars for Z amount of land. The idea here is to say, okay, this is Palos Park, folks, and if you want to develop it, these are the guidelines, frameworks, and zoning constraints that direct what can and can't be done.
And then they can go to market with that understanding, and a person would buy or contract purchase knowing what they could or couldn't do, or at least had an idea on it. So right now, again, the village annexed these properties. Until we did the plan 14 months ago, there was nothing that covered how this would ever be, because when the comprehensive plan was done 10 years ago or 7 years ago or whatever, this whole area was just hatched red. It was called Western Growth Area. If it's going to be annexed, a plan has to be developed for this at a later date. Well, this is the later date. So when the village-wide plan was done, that area was never planned in detail. It was designated as an area needing a plan in the future. So the village did that 14 months ago, adopted it, and then we wanted tighter regulations to ensure quality. So we had to amend the zoning ordinance to accommodate it in terms of regulations and procedure. So that's the Western Growth Area PUD ordinance. And that's why we did the design guidelines to further give the Plan Commission something with which to evaluate a proposal.
This is almost like the airport property in the city of Chicago, the O'Hare Airport. I used to work up there. If I drive down McCarthy Road, I'm in another village, and then all of a sudden I'm back in Palos Park. It seems bizarre to me that we even want to bother.
Well, again, so the charge at this point is, I sort of want to keep the conversation on point. The annexation has happened, it's part of the village. The plan was adopted 14 months ago. So the charge now is to make sure that if development were to happen, the village had the tools it needed to ensure the development was good. So we're not sort of debating whether we should or shouldn't annex it, or whether we should or shouldn't have planned for it, that's done. Now we're just trying to get the zoning correct and the guidelines correct.
Well, after they get their sewer and water, can they just do what Glen Eagles did and say?
No,
No,
Yes,
no.
they can.
no.
It's a state law.
You can say what you want to, sir, but you're incorrect.
I will give you the number. Our own state rep, Mrs. Burke, 3 years ago, had a state law passed that said anybody who owns 20 acres can de-annex from a village. There are a couple of conditions, none of which I think, I didn't come here to argue with you, Mr. Pope, but you know darn well they can de-annex if they want to.
If I knew it, I would say I know it. I don't know it, it's not true.
I will send you the rule, the law.
Fair enough.
It's not a rule, it's a law.
But I understand what you're saying.
Well, how did Glen Eagles descend, how did they,
We don't have sewer and water out there.
was that part of the deal to start with? Excuse me, what basis did they use to de-annex?
We don't have sewer and water out there.
All right, so, because we don't have sewer and water out there, they were able to de-annex several hundred acres of the village, and we didn't even put up a fight?
We did put up a fight. We got an agreement and we came to a settlement with them.
I know, I still read it, $175,000. Point is, what basis did they use to de-annex? I bet they used that law.
Do you want me to say it again? We don't have sewer and water out there. That's the basis of their
We didn't
de-annexation.
have it out there when we annexed them. They knew that, didn't they? Also, one more thing.
It's just, gonna stop.
I want to ask about this, number 10, a preliminary a preliminary school and tax impact study indicating the impact of the development on the local taxing bodies.
Right.
What taxing bodies are you referring to there?
Local, not state or anything like that, but local,
What
so
taxing
school
bodies?
districts.
But they're not our schools.
Correct.
Yeah,
The Lamont schools.
We still have-
they still have to do that. Any development that gets proposed, and this is universal in any town,
Can they-
anywhere.
Can they put a kibosh onto this because they
No.
don't like the
No,
plan?
no, it's
They
not.
say there's gonna be too many kids coming in here, and they're not getting the municipal tax.
They're certainly entitled in the public hearing process to come to the meeting and say what they think, but they can't kill a project if it's meeting the school impact fee criteria requirement that meets the standard they've set up for developers.
That money wouldn't go to our school districts, it would go to the school districts where the
Well,
children.
we have to make
are
sure
going to
that-
enroll.
It would go to Lamont School District.
It would go to where the kids are enrolled.
It would go to the school district, which is
Yes,
Lamont.
Correct,
And the
but,
library district, which is Lamont.
correct, but they
And
would
the
be,
fire protection district, which is Lamont.
correct, but they would be Palos Park residents. And so
Correct.
those services protect, educate, whatever, and serve Palos Park residents. So it's our duty and legally to make sure that those districts are getting the fees that they need due to the impact of the proposed development. That's true in any town.
Now, what if their district has different rules about, say, open space than ours? Who trumps that? Who trumps
We
that?
do.
Again, open space is not
I mean, parkland. If the Lamont School District demands
that's,
so much acreage
That's
set aside for a park, and we do not, who would be the ones that they would listen to?
school districts do not have impact dedication requirements for parkland. They can have impact fees for school or for the cost of schools to take care of a kid from kindergarten through 12, but they can't impose on a developer parkland for a school district.
But
So parkland dedication requirements is a purview of the
we don't,
village.
at 118, we don't charge impact fees, I know that.
We do actually have impact fees. We call them exaction
Yeah,
fees.
It's the same
They
thing.
will pay exaction fees both to the parks and the schools, the transportation system, and the library system. Right now, they're approximately $17,000 for a 4-bedroom home.
Can I just address some of Bob's comments? So, all throughout, folks have been confused a little bit about boundaries. So, I heard from the Lamont folks quite a bit. Well, this is Lamont Township, so we want it to be Lamont Village. Oh. Those concepts have nothing to do with each other. There's many villages that are in more than one township. There's very few villages that are coterminous with their township. So it's irrelevant. So I would say those Lamont schools are our schools. It may not be the schools that my children go to because I don't live in that district, but those are our schools. And to that point, we have, for probably the last 5 years, met with the superintendents and elected members of the boards of both the high school and elementary district to keep them informed about every aspect of this process. And those meetings occur very regularly. Certainly every 6 months, sometimes sooner or more often if there's more information to give. Because of the very reason that you suggest, Bob, that they're in Payless Park. And so development out there will have an impact on them. And they need to be informed because they're planning. They're determining right now whether they reopen a school that they closed a few years ago. And that really is dependent on how quickly things get developed here. So we need to be in constant communication with the Lamont schools, just like we are with the Payless schools. So I just wanted to mention the fact that we are really in constant communication with those school districts.
So you also do realize that none of the elementary or high schools that our kids in Payless Park use are actually in Payless Park.
Right.
Well, no,
They're not, they're not. No,
And you
yeah,
gotta
I
realize-
agree with you 100%. I was thinking the same
District
thing.
118, within District 118 is the entire Lorraine Valley campus. The point is, just because somebody lives on 123rd Street doesn't mean they're gonna go to school at Sandburg, they're gonna go to school at Stagg, I think, unless they live in what's called the option zone where I live. The point is that the school district in Lamont, I wanna make sure down the road, they don't have the ability to stop something we're gonna do because they don't like it because it's their school district. Even though it's our village, it's their school district. And I think there might potentially be a problem there down the road. That's all.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is just based off of, every school district is in some municipality. And school districts, often there are multiple, and in any municipality often has multiple school districts. We've worked in towns that have had as many as 23 school districts in the community. And so that's always going to be an issue, but I've never seen a school district literally squash development in a municipality. They might have their opinion, they want to make sure they're taken care of, they want to make sure they get the fees they need to accommodate the students' needs. But I think it would be a mischaracterization to think that the school district in Lamont would be able to squash or kibosh the development here because they're in Lamont and we're in Payless.
So I was asking the question if they could.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I don't know on what grounds. We have the public hearings, Plan Commission makes a recommendation, Village Board makes the decision to approve or not approve, and like any other entity or individual, they could come and let their opinions be known. But in terms of the ordinance that we've written, our charge is to make sure that they are kept whole in the fees that we receive from the development that would impact their ability to provide education for students.
One more thing and then I'll leave you alone. This booklet
Yeah,
contains the word should many times. Not would, not shall,
right.
but should.
That's
Yes,
yes.
it's very important. The
Yes.
roof should look like this. The road should look like that.
correct.
The material should be this. What does that mean?
Okay, so again, the guidelines and the plan are policy. They're guidelines. They are not regulations. The plan and the guidelines do not dictate what someone can and cannot do. They are meant to inform the developer, inform the property owner, inform staff, inform the plan commission, and inform the village board so that they can make more informed decisions on what we're trying to achieve. It is the zoning ordinance and the subdivision regulations that say shall, will, and should, because that's regulation. Policy doesn't say shall because it's not regulatory. It is policy. You guys should be doing X, Y, and Z because you're not, I'm not going to vote to support your petition. Or you guys are doing, we say you should design with the natural environment in mind. You guys do exactly this, so you're going to get my support when it comes to the vote. So planning documents and design guidelines are not regulatory, so they don't say shall, will, they are policy documents. Ordinances are regulatory, that's where you say will, shall, and things like that. So that's on purpose, it's on purpose.
Thank you.
Hey, John, I think it would be helpful, I'm sorry, it would be helpful to have the discussion we had in the last session about building as of right.
Right.
And the approval process. You went over it, but I just want to contrast that with what happens in our R1
Sure.
section.
So this is something we talked about the last, first half of the open house. The difference between development, say in the old Palos area versus anything that's governed just by this western growth area. There's a thing called as of right development. So let's say I own a piece of property and I want to build a house. My wife and I want to build a house. And, and we meet the required setbacks, we're within the height limitations, the building footprint or lot coverage, it complies with all village regulations. We draw up our plans, we come into the village, we say, here's our plans. They run it through the zoning analysis and they say, yep, you meet all the requirements. They go through all the building permits, say, yeah, your sprinkler system, your structure, whatever, it all looks good. They issue a building permit, you just go. There's no legal notice, there's no public hearing, there's no plan commission, there's no village board. It is as of right. You meet the conditions, you have the right to build your home. It's just get a permit, very simple. In this area, no one has as of right authority. Any development out here is going to require approval as a planned unit development. It's going to require legal notice, public hearing with the plan commission. It's going to require meetings with the village board to get approval, reviewing all the things I've talked about. Natural environment, road, parking, architecture, lighting, how it looks, drainage, walkability, all this stuff. So it's not like a developer can just say, oh, you guys have changed the zoning, I'm just going to start building out here. Can't do it. So there's a big difference between zoning, the way it's established to permit as of right development. These are the rules, you meet them, build. Out here, it's a district applied just for this area. It's called the Western Growth Area Planned Unit Development District. It's a zoning district just for this area. And in order to build anything out there, they have to go through this process. So we've done that intentionally, so there is no as of right development. So no one's going to be surprised, no one's going to drive by and say, like, boy, when did that come out of the ground? Or, oh my God, I had no idea they were doing that. That looks awful. That's the ugliest thing. It won't happen. Because there will be required to be this public hearing process where residents, staff, plan commission, and village board all have a shot at reviewing this more than once. Because we want to make sure it's done correctly. So it's unique to this area, and the regulations in this thing, and there's a few copies floating around, the zoning dictates that process. So one of the things used to evaluate the effectiveness or the appropriateness of a development is to look at the plan and look at the guidelines, but they have to follow the regulations in there. But we've taken away the ability to do as of right development, because we don't want anybody surprised. We don't want anything coming out of the ground that people are like, oh my God, where did this get the permit? That can't happen. And that's by design. So that's very specific and that's unique to this area. So it's unlike any other part of the village. We've truly tried to be as cautious and as prescriptive as we can in terms of ensuring multiple eyes on these and setting up an expectation of quality and appropriateness of anything that might get proposed. And we want to make sure that everybody knows it and nobody's guessing. So.
But yet remain flexible enough to reflect the fact that we have no plans for anything yet.
Yeah. Right, that's exactly right. So there's no development proposed yet for out there that we have to look at or go by. And we don't want to wait for that to come at us and not have anything in place, because then that'd be a disaster.
And we don't have any anticipated in the near future.
No one's indicated that I'm aware of that, as soon as this gets passed next year, we're going to come in with X. Finally, look at that.
I'm so sorry.
You've been very
I just want
patient.
to shift gears, so I want to make sure you're beating that to death.
You've
I
been,
think you do.
grab an extra cookie on the way out.
Take two.
Relative to bringing sewer and water out to this area, What is the projected dates on that, and financial responsibility, how is that gonna be handled?
It's better for probably Rick to handle, right?
Okay.
Right, well, the village has a plan for extension of a water main out there. Sanitary sewer will come from areas out in that area, either through Cog Hill or up from the south. So there are some sanitary sewer systems that will be extended at some point. The water main engineering will be complete probably this year, and then it will probably sit and wait for a user to come along and say we need it for the village to put it in. So we have engineered the water system all the way through to Bell Road. We do have the appropriate easements across what's now Forest Preserve, what used to be at the cemetery land, and we have an easement and property for a water tower eventually out there. So we're securing everything, all the rights, making the plans so that it can be extended.
And what do they feel the duration will be to have that accomplished?
I'm sorry?
In other words, what you're saying is you really don't have a plan in place to commence with this right now. What you're saying is you need to have somebody that has a usage or a need before you commence this. And I'm asking you, how long will it then take to?
Oh, the whole construction process, well, we have all our, it's getting our ducks in a row. So there's a lot of processes in here, including applying for and being approved for an IEPA, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, low interest loan, getting the rights of way. So we have first section all locked up. We have to apply for the permits, put that out to construction bid. You're probably talking about a year to put a water main in. Somebody's coming in through a development process. It's going to take them a while. Once they make a proposal to buy a piece of property and go through this process, by the time they're ready to build, the water line could be there.
This
as
is
well as utilities.
The hearing process that we've put in place here is probably the fastest, a year to 2 years typically for a developer to be, to have their approvals, and then they have to get their permitting approvals, which is at least another 6 to 12 months. So you're looking at least 2 to 3, 4 years before there's a shovel in the ground.
And then you're
And
talking
how
about
does the financial commitment, how is that addressed?
the recapture fee.
Yeah.
So
Will be negotiated with the developer as to what they will pay, likely on a per acre basis, what they're taking down.
And I guess one of the key things about communities annex areas for a lot of reasons. One of the most valuable is to control an area. If you've got an area adjacent to your community and development happens either in the county or another community annexes up to your border, they can do whatever they want. The impact is still all on you, but you have no control or say over it. So that's one of the reasons when the opportunity presented itself and the village annexed, we had to move very quickly to get a plan in place because we don't know, no development is proposed now, but we want to get ahead of one that may be proposed and be prepared to handle it well.
But I think what we're also saying though is until such point in time that we get the sewer and the water and what have you out there, we still have the issue of exactly what happened with Glen Eagles to transpire again, right?
I can't speak to that, somebody else might be able to.
Yes, and that's why we're actually doing more with the water
I mean,
system.
can't you just run a hose out there just to say we've got it?
You can't, just kind of like how the neighbor steals your water.
It's swimming pool season.
Right, so, one of the issues at the village board level over the last 6 months was whether we start spending money on building the pipe, engineering the pipe, acquiring rights of way. And the decision was made to go ahead and do as much as we can without putting the pipe in the ground so that we don't have the issue with Glen Eagles.
Well, I think you have to demonstrate that you are proceeding, otherwise, you're giving them another reason Well, you guys are.
You know, Glen Eagles, was it? I think that the time frame for Lamont to do, to get utilities is not that significantly different from Payless Park. But, you know, that's what Glen Eagles believes. So, we're just trying to do everything in our power so that we're prepared for development without making the huge expenditure of putting a pipe in the ground without someone who has a development plan, which we, as a village council, have looked at as foolish at this point.
And then you will run that pipe out to some point, and then the developer will essentially improve the area.
Take it and bring it through the development.
Yeah, we're not responsible for bringing the water to the houses.
Right, no, I understand that.
So, but those are thorny issues, right? I mean, even the engineering and the land, the right-of-way acquisition, it's not inexpensive. So that was the, you know, a discussion on our village council of whether that should happen.
More than one.
Yes.
On that note, we lost the Payless Hospital because we had no sewer and water. We lost a lot of things, and now we lost the country club, we don't have sewer and water. If we build it, people come. Maybe it's time we build it and let it and see what happens, because if it's there, they're gonna use it. If they gotta wait 2 years to get a sewer and water, they might just go to Lamont too. It's my opinion, we should build it now. Get it out there.
We'll send you the bill, Bob.
I'm paying the bills for my taxes anyway, now I'm paying hours later, it's cheaper.
You can talk to the other
It ain't gonna be-
4,599 people.
It ain't gonna be any cheaper 10 years, 2 years from now, is it?
I
It
have no
wasn't,
idea.
it was cheaper 3 years ago.
Well, actually, it was more expensive because money was more expensive, so.
Well, right now, you wouldn't do it because the steel's so high.
Well, no, it's not the pipe in the ground, it's the actual loans for being able to do the entire project. And if we'd have done it 3 years ago, we'd have been paying 6%, and now we'll probably be paying somewhere in the high 2s to low 3s.
Well, okay, let's go.
All right, we'll write you the check, you can write us the check. We're ready to go.
I pay my taxes, but I know you gotta pay for it. But if we don't put it out there, somebody else will.
We understand, Bob.
I think the thing to remember in all this is, you know, the plan got adopted a year and a half ago, or a little over a year ago. We're looking at doing the guidelines and the PUD ordinance now. This is the long play. This isn't a vacant half-acre site in the middle of town. I mean, this is the long play, and this is to set the table for the next 20-plus years of investment and growth and development in this area. So this is getting all the right pieces in place to make it happen and happen correctly. But make no bones about it, this is the long play, and this is why you need to have this stuff in place.
So, and, you know, John said it earlier about the ability to control the development. I trust Payless Park to plan that development more than I trust any of the other entities that might develop, or governmental organizations that might develop it. Lamont's a nice town. I find their homes to be very cookie cutter, and that's not what I want for Payless Park. That's not what I want next to Payless Park.
Yeah, I mean, just look at this property, it's on the west side of Bell, north of McCarthy. It's easy to understand why we want to control our destiny to the west.
Well, I hope you can do that. You might be the first one in the country to be able to do that.
Well, we can't go all the way to the oil refinery that's in Lamont. We can do our best.
The only thing I'm disappointed in is not touching the village. I feel that we're traveling 15 minutes to find the village again, like another village. And it just, Lamont is not gonna screw it up if they own it. I doubt it very much, okay? They don't do a bad job. And I don't know that we're gonna be able to do a better job, because when a developer comes in here, basically, they're gonna get what they want. that's the way it works. It's not, we should be able to tell them what we want and what we're gonna get from them, but it seems to be the opposite all the time. I just don't see the benefit of it anymore. I think it's you're gonna need more employees. You're gonna need, I don't know how the police are gonna work that out. Is it gonna be another station up there? It's kind of like a no deal to me. It's not Palos Park.
That's a fair point.
Nothing's Palos
I will
Park.
tell you, I wrestled with all of those issues when I was thinking about this. Do we nestle down where we are and just try to maintain what we have? But one of my favorite things to say to people is, because I get told this a lot of time, we want Palos Park to stay the same. Well, that's not a choice. There's a multiple choice, and stay the same is not one of the choices. Just look at a map from 30 years ago, the difference in the development. So, in my view, you can shape the change you want, or you can be impacted by the change that happens. Those are the two choices. And that's what we're trying to do here, is shape the change we want.
Is it also conceivable that if we do a good job with this, equestrian estates might just decide that they might want to come in?
Well,
I mean,
again, as I said, we, in constant discussions with the school district, we maintain a good relationship with the board members at Equestrian. And I had the conversation with their board members in 2010, because they said the same thing to me. We want to keep Equestrian the way we want it. And I said, that's great. That's not going to happen. In the next 20 years, this area is all going to be different. So who do you trust with that development? Do you trust Cook County? Do you think that's where you're going to be protected by them? Do you trust Lamont? Or do you trust Palos Park? Look at Palos Park. Look at Lamont. Again, no offense, I love my Lamont neighbors, but I live in Palos Park. So that's what I said to them. We keep in constant contact with the equestrian. We want equestrian estate. We feel it embodies what Palos Park is all about, you know, and I think someday it will happen. And it certainly was a lot more likely to happen annexing Cothill.
Absolutely. When there is a water pipe running in front of Equestrian Estates full of Lake Michigan water,
Yeah.
you can start the stopwatch.
If you want equestrian estate status in the Palos Park, go out there with a gallon of our water and get a gallon of water from
Well-
make some coffee with it.
Yeah.
And you'll see what comes from the lake and what comes from the Des Plaines River Valley. And there will be no argument there at all.
That's what I said.
That's right.
I mean, I live in Post and Rail, so I live on between Wolf and 104th on the south side of McCarthy. That wasn't part of Palos Park at one point. So if you think Palos Park has been the same thing for the last, you pick some set number of years, it wasn't. I mean, it just isn't.
Well, I've been here 52 years, and I haven't changed much, and neither has my particular area. And I like it the way it is.
Spoken like a true Palos Park.
That's right. But I see a lot of things that could be improved in our little village, and now we're gonna take on another thing. And I'm just, you know.
I want to de-annex Post and Rail.
If you get 20 acres, you can do it.
I like Poston Road, that's really
Thank
nice.
you for having a enlightening discussion.
Thank you, I appreciate it. It's a little after 7, I just want to be mindful of time, so thanks for coming out. You can continue to obviously stay and chat as much as you want to, but the documents, the plan is online, the guidelines are online. By the end of the day tomorrow, the PUD ordinance, the last fun thing to look at, will be online. So it's all there to look at. Again, nothing's been approved yet. The guidelines or the ordinance haven't. Next, it'll go to the Plan Commission for discussion. So if you have any more feedback, take a look at it online and email and let us know.
Thank you.
All right?
Thanks for your
everybody. I
time, John.
appreciate it. Unique site for business park. But anyway, so this is the end of the presentation, but We just wanted to reiterate what the plan does, which was adopted a little over a year and a half ago. The design guidelines are used, the design guidelines and the plan are not regulatory, they're guiding documents. The plan is used to inform decision making, and if you measure an application or evaluate an application against the plan, you can see if it is or isn't consistent with the plan, the vision, which is pretty detailed. Then you can get into evaluating all development against the design guidelines to see if the appearance, the design is consistent with what we want to see. And then the PUD ordinance is the regulation to which the village legally accommodates development. So it's sort of the technical document. So, but those are the three compendium pieces that we set out to accomplish about a year ago. So, that's it. Answer any questions.
So just a few questions and clarifications, Jen. When we talk about the amendment to our ordinance, our zoning ordinance, a lot of people ask the question, well, is this going to impact existing areas of Palos Park?
The answer is no. We wanted to make sure this is part of Palos Park, but it is a very unique opportunity within Palos Park. And we wanted to make sure the plan, the design guidelines, and the PUD ordinance, the regulations, the zoning, are specific to the western growth area. Cog Hill, the Mid-Iron, that area out there. We didn't want to, so this isn't, if you've got single-family residential zoning in the eastern older area of Palos, it's completely different than the zoning we're developing for out there. The zoning for out west is western growth area plan unit development. That's the district. So it's not, there's not an underlying R1A or R2. It's its own unique district to any place else in the village. It doesn't exist, so it won't change anything in Old Palos. And anything that gets built out there has to comply with everything that I've been going over. But it has zero impact on development or impact on existing uses or development anywhere in established Palos. It's unique only and applicable only to what's way out west.
So another question I want to ask, and I'm a monopolist, but there's points that I want to make sure that people in the audience, people watching from home, understand. Just comparing and contrasting what approvals are required for a single-family house in Palos Park now versus the approval of a plan of PUD development.
Right.
Now, if you want to build a single-family house, there's a number of regulations for the R1A district, which include setback requirements, the area of the property, that mass, that the house, the height. But if you meet all those, you can build whatever you want. So I want to contrast that with what is we're putting forth today, which there's nothing that gets built as of right without approval through the planning commission and the village council.
And that's a real good question. So, and you articulated it very well. And the term you used, as of right, is important. So the village currently has a zoning ordinance. The village currently has a subdivision code. And anybody who wants to build, let's say, a single-family home, if the lot is big enough, if they want to build and it meets the required height, does not exceed the height, meets all of the setbacks, meets all of the other requirements for lot coverage. If you check, if you meet all the requirements, you can just apply for a building permit, get your building permit and build your house, all right? There's no public hearing, there's no notifying your neighbor, there's no, has to be approved by the plan commission and then go to the village council for approval. There's none of that. If you're building a single family home in the R1As that are on the eastern side of town, or Old Palos, if you meet the zoning, staff reviews your building permit application, you comply, you get your permit, you build. Very matter of fact, it's called as of right. You get to just do it. Anything out in this area is not as of right. Any development out in this area requires a public hearing, requires meetings with the plan commission, requires residents and neighbors and other people in Palos being allowed to comment and weigh in on it. and anything will be evaluated in this area against the plan and the design guidelines before Plan Commission can recommend it to Village Board. Then Village Board has to have a public meeting to approve or not approve or take action on it. But there is no as-of-right development in the western growth area. We want to make sure it's done right, because it's a variety of development that doesn't exist elsewhere. It's really got a lot of natural features we want to make sure that are protected. So nothing in the western growth area can just come in and take a building permit and go build. They have to get it approved and everything gets reviewed. So we wanted to make sure those protections were in there. But that's a really important distinction. It's unique to other areas of the village in that regard.
You know, the problem we found with as of right, is that sometimes builders go through machinations that maybe meet the letter of the rule but don't meet the spirit of it.
They're very creative.
Yes. So that's a problem we face with homes. It hasn't been, in the McMansion era, it was a bigger problem. I don't know that we, have problems with, lot coverage and meeting lot coverage as much anymore. But here, everything needs to be approved.
Yeah, developers and builders, and to their credit, they can look at an ordinance very creatively and maximize a square footage or a height or something, whether you're looking at mezzanines or pitched roofs, or it's a walkout basement, because my house is sort of on a thing and my interpretation of grade is X, Y, or Z, so they can get pretty creative. There's none of that sort of creative interpretation here that would allow them to do something without being reviewed. So.
Building up the foundations so that, your neighbor looks out from their first floor window into a mound of dirt.
Yeah, right.
Those are things that you have to continually modify your ordinance to prevent, because most neighbors wouldn't appreciate that.
And that's how, until the community sort of steps back and does a wholesale rewrite of their ordinance, most ordinance amendments are done reactive to something happening that nobody anticipated would ever happen. And people are like, how did you guys let that happen? And so you go back and you fix that little piece of the code. I've worked in towns where, not joking, in certain neighborhoods, things were held to like 1.5 or 2-story homes, but there wasn't any restriction for accessory structures, because they didn't think it would be a big deal. And a couple of people started realizing they could put in like 3+ story detached garages, because it was sort of silent. And well, you then go in and change it, but not before you see a few of those pop up with neighbors. Like, I walk into my backyard, there's like this giant thing there. So you can't, there's no surprises out here in the Western North.
Let me ask you kind of a generic question. Obviously, I know you work for a municipality. Do you also work for private developers?
Mm-hmm.
I assume because of that experience, all of this 14 pages of stuff that a developer has, hoops they have to jump through, I assume that's standard fare?
Yeah, I don't know if it's standard, but it's not an anomaly. So I don't want to say everybody has them, but for unique areas, for development areas, it's very, very, very common. And our goal here, and we said this at the beginning when we were engaged to do this, we're not looking to dictate architecture, we're not looking to dictate design, because there's some really creative, great developers out there. There just are. So what we're trying to do is establish a minimum threshold of character and quality. So nothing we have in here, a developer should come in here and say, like, well, I just can't make that work. That's too onerous, or that's draconian, or that doesn't exist in here. But we do work with other developers, we do work with the private sector. We worked on design guidelines for industrial, for commercial, for residential before, and communities have been using them for years, just fine. So, I say this all the time, I wanted to, probably the lens I view everything through is not that of a planner's lens, but as an entrepreneur's lens. I own my own company, I know what it's like to have your name on the door and to keep the lights on and keep your employees paid and whatever else. And I have a lot of good friends with the developers, so my objective is to create plans and regulations that deliver over time the character of community that it wants by supercharging private investment. If you can supercharge private investment in a way that delivers to a community everything the community wants, then it's a win-win. I don't view it as sort of a hammer to developers or to keep them down. So this is all very viable, it's not overly onerous, and the key thing about this is the plan and the design guidelines are policy, they're guideline. That's not the regulation. The regulations are in the ordinance, the PUD ordinance. So if something does come up in a guideline, and a developer says, listen, I can do this, 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 and this, but this one, it just doesn't make any sense for this site, here's why. You use it as a guide to inform your decision. You're not bound by that. So there's flexibility built into the interpretation of design guidelines in the plan. And it's an incumbent upon the applicant to make their case. The Planning Commission and Village Council then says, here's our take on what you've said. So they're not bound to the letter of the law because the plan and the regulations are not, or the guidelines are not regulation. The ordinance, the zoning ordinance, the PUD ordinance, that's the regulation. And this level of detail is not found in the PUD ordinance, but in the guiding documents.
A lot of the stuff that we require them to turn around and resubmit, we're gonna hand them, right? I mean, I assume we're gonna have, or already have, a packet of information about topography and all kinds of stuff, or do we not?
The village would likely have a lot of that in its GIS database, some of it. Topography to a certain level, I suppose. But any developer anywhere.
We know where all the utilities are
Right, right.
so forth and so on. I guess I'm looking at this from a private developer standpoint. I mean, nobody's gonna buy a 10-acre site and jump through all those hoops. They're gonna buy a 400-acre site or 500-acre site or whatever, because there are a lot of hoops to jump through here, and I mean, they're gonna spend $100,000 before they ever even come calling us.
I work with a lot of developers that are doing stuff on sites that are not 400, maybe they're 20 or 30 or whatever. The list that's on here is really standard PUD requirements. This is not overly onerous, and any developer that you would want developing in your town would look at this list and be like, yeah, that's routine. We do this for every project.
That's all I wanna hear. That's
Yeah,
fine.
it is, we didn't want to do anything that was overly onerous or an anomaly. You got a good developer, this is standard fare.
Okay.
So it looks like a long list, but it's.
That's my only concern.
Yep, should not be an issue at all. This shouldn't surprise anybody.
But it may discourage this person that wants to buy 10 acres and build, 20 townhouses.
Well, if they're proposing a density or a character or something that doesn't match the plan or the design guidelines or the intent, they'll have a hard time convincing the Planning Commission and Village that it's a good idea, or the residents. But the process with which they would put that together, they'll hire a survey firm to come in here, do an alpha survey, they'll have the trees recorded in the wetlands, that's all database stuff developers have access to. They'd likely ask for the village's base map and GIS, those layers are available. So assembling 80% of what's on this list could be done pretty quickly.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Once a developer's plan for, say, 100 acres of residential, and let's say a single family, once that's passed, gavel's struck with the council, what does an individual, and not that developer is a developer, not necessarily a builder, so I'm just wondering what an individual homeowner that might want to buy a lot, what process do they go through that might be different than if they were building over here somewhere?
Sure, that's a good point. So if they get that approved, and let's say they're planning a subdivision, but they're not building the individual homes at the time they get the PUD approved. That's counted. The way it's typically done is you'll see the streets, you'll see the platted lots. On each lot, you'll see a little dash, a dotted line outlining the building envelope. And then what they would likely do is say, here's sort of a photo examples of the types of homes we tend to see here or anticipate here. All the setbacks are dotted all on the individual platted lots. The covenants would be, all single family homes would be with these buildable areas. Nothing would be higher than 35 or 40 feet tall. The covenants would require that they use masonry or natural materials. So all that would be part of, so you're not saying the architecture, they could hire anybody, but there'd be a minimum sort of quality expectation, and as long as the individual people came in and met that, they'd be able to get the permit and go.
So in other words, the individual subject to some types of criteria. They may not be exactly the same as in the R1A part of Pales Park.
Correct.
But they're going to be subject to those, some kinds of requirements.
Yeah,
Lot
and-
coverage,
Right, and,
height,
right, and
and
when
that's
the,
part of the plat.
absolutely, so when the PUD gets approved, they would have to divulge and commit to the building regulations that their single-family homeowners or builders would have to comply to when they come on board individually to build their homes. Now, they might say, here's our lots, we've platted all these, we commit to agreeing to the R1A height and lot coverage and setback requirements. The setback requirements are dashed on the plat, you can see them. And in our submittal materials, we say that all height and whatever else will comply with the R1A district. So they could do that, or they could just say all building heights would be no greater than 35 feet. But the approval for that envelope, those regulations, be approved as part of the public hearing, the PUD, but that then sets the table for the individual homeowner or builder to come in and construct that structure, because the larger plan and the guidance for that larger plan was already approved in a public hearing. Yeah. So again, they wouldn't be able to come in as of right and just start building the house out there. They could come in and get their permit if the plan development was approved, which established their rules for their house.
That's a great question.
I don't remember the answer to this, I think I've been told, but is there a maximum density already built into the plan, and is it different than what we have now?
Yeah, so there is a maximum density. The plan, I'd have to go back and double check. I believe the plan recommends a gross overall density range of somewhere between 3 and 6 dwelling units per acre. I have to go back and double check, but I think that's what it states. And the reason we say that is because there are some areas that are so uncovered with wooded areas, someone might buy a large tract of land, 2/3 of it may be wooded area, so they have to transfer some of the development in there, because we say, listen, don't clear the trees, keep them. So that they would allow them to transfer some of what would go there into the open area. We also have a target open space component of 30 to 40% open space preserved for this area in general. So there is density ranges, and there are open space targets that we want people to try to achieve as well. And those are in the plan. But 3 to 6 is the range of expected density, depending on the product, because it could be almost anything. And with an open space over the spectrum of the full development area, in between 30 and 40%.